Let's get it. F the culture. Brought to you by Poeticlee, Poeticlee, on Life is Poetic TV. And that F may sound a little daunting. That F may sound a little disrespectful. That F may be the most liberating thing you'll hear this week. And that's the goal, is to break the noise and reclaim the truth as Americans, as humans, as people that want to come together. You want what you want. I want what I want. This is supposed to be the land of the free. The land where dreams come true through action, through faith, through unity. So, are we being that? Are we allowing our heart to truly be open for one another? Are we only allowing what this country has truly bred within the greed, manipulation, violence to only be the only thing that runs through our veins? Are we actually taking stance to understand and embrace the pain of this country? This pain of this land? Understanding energy, understanding frequency still moves throughout this soil, still travels through the air. When the sun rises, it still sets light on the same land where there were battles fought for freedom, that do not stand up to the freedom and do not stand up to the battles and do not stand up to the fight. Do not stand up to the marches, the boycotts, that do not stand up to the protests that once made on this land. A sun rises. So, through that sun lens, through the eyes of that sun, through the vibrations of that light, what are we really seeing? Now, I don't want to go too deep. I don't want to go too poetic on the state of where we are. I want to keep it simple. I want to keep it direct. And I want this to be something that can be fruitful and something that can be helpful for us as a community and as a culture, right? Because that F, when I say F the culture, I want that F to take form in many different shapes, freeing the culture, fucking up the system that is currently existing, right? On either side that you may look at, it's time to really burn down and actually make movements, actually make strides, right? Otherwise, you know, what I want to do, and that's why I come with my notes, baby. I come prepared, right? Because otherwise, we're moving into a cycle that isn't going to lessen up. This thing is breathing around us and it's absorbing what we are and it's giving you what you give it. So if you give it nonchalant, it will give you, you know what? We'll give you a little bit of taste of what that nonchalant is going to do when you're not active in your community. We're going to give you a little taste of what that nonchalant is going to do when you're not active in your legislator. You know? And when you're not active in your justice, when you're not active in your child's life. And then you look at your child and you say, why are they like this? Why are they acting like this? Because how have you nourished that plant? How have you taken time to truly have grace with it? To be patient? To have boundaries, standards, and allow it to meet those standards, allow it to help guide it to those standards. What is our standard as Americans? Right? And I think it starts down to a lot, and let's take a focus lens, right, through this lens of media. And I think even that standard of media and how we've been allowing ourselves to be portrayed and allowing our voices, our messages, and whatever sense it may be, and how that is being just influenced around the world. You can travel to the world and you will see America's influence. This is the land of influence. Yet, who are we being influenced by? Who are we being programmed by? So that we are being mindful and we are being on top of our game when this goes to influencing the world. You know, I think about what they're not telling us. And that's what I want this to be about, F the culture. News, we're going to talk about some different topics, but I want this to be things about through a historical lens that then ties it to where we are now, so we can truly understand why I'm saying F the culture. Because you'll hear me talk about the Reconstruction era, you'll hear me talk about the Jim Crow era, then you'll hear me talk about right now, where we are right now, and when I talk about the current administration in foresight, right? Because a lot of us have foresight too, because we're not slow. We're intuitive people with this land. So in the end, if you pay attention, history repeats itself, right? So like there are going to be some things we talk about in the upcoming weeks, the upcoming episodes. This comes out Monday through Wednesday. We're getting our gearings right. We're getting everything right. You know, we just started this. This is episode 3. So I really want to say thank you for tuning in. You'll find it right here on YouTube, Poeticlee, Poeticlee. You can also check out Poeticlee.com. You can also check out Like This Poetic, Like This Poetic TV on Instagram, and see that, and that F the culture, DA. F the culture. And one of the things that we're going to talk about in the upcoming, episodes is being able to talk about climate policy and environmental justice. These are the things to really focus on, because these sometimes are the topics that may not be sexy. It's not your pop culture. We've been so influenced by pop culture that's what we think runs the government, literally. Really understand the powers of climate policy, environmental justice. There is an ongoing debate about U.S. climate policy. Is global, global change and all these things taking place as far as is it really bothering us? When people look at the ozone layer, people look at the different climate things we're going through. Is this really something to be mindful of? It is, because all this stuff is a plant. Think about it. How you take care of that plant, that tree, depends on how it lives. Now, we just happen to be on one of the most strongest and most durable plants you ever known. That's called this planet. And, but all these things tie in together. When I think about even when you think about environmental racism, and this isn't about just continue to focus on the races and who we are as people and our skin color, though is to be aware of the systematic oppression, is to be aware of the systematic things that have tied us into environments that do not benefit us. When I think about brothers from the hood, or I think about brothers from certain environments that grew up with asthma, that grew up with certain things that didn't help their bodies, it sometimes was related into, sometimes based on the environments that they were in, where they were by a factory or by waste that went into the air that didn't help your clean breathing. It's odd how we do this. When I tie into, and this is the things we're going to talk about, climate policy, because when you think about even the Flint water crisis, is this new administration talking about that? That's still something that happened. That's still something to pay attention to and to be mindful of. What's going on with those people? What's going on with the effects? I remember when Obama was in office and that was taking place, and you saw how people's skin, you saw how people's lungs, you saw all these different effects to the body taking place. And we still haven't, what's the report on that? What's happening? How are there other cities with bad water? I know right here in North Carolina, I pour that water all the time. I see a little something. This is why it's important to educate ourselves on local climate policies, see who's in those positions, write them a letter, show up to town hall meeting, say, nah, I got some spots right here in my neck of the woods that I'm about to pop up and let them know, hey, I see some waste out here that shouldn't be here. I'm not talking about just trash. I'm talking about something somebody's pouring into here as getting away their toxin of ink, their toxins of whatever oil or whatever that they're just pouring into the water, that then runs into our systems and affects us as people. These are things we should be on. Because if somebody was coming into your house and disturbing your air, disturbing your water, you would be on it, I would hope. And if not, I think it's time to wake up and to be on it, because you have other people around you that are going to be affected. The decisions made today on climate change will determine the world we live in tomorrow. The decisions we make today will determine the world. If no plants are planted today, we'll have a world tomorrow where it's a desert. You understand that, right? So that's going to be one of the things I wanted to lead off into, that I'm not going to really spend a lot of time talking about today, because that's a little something that we're going to talk about moving forward. What I really want to get into today and talk about these next few minutes, it's not a long time, but it's a good time here with me, it's the student debt relief. And I want to keep, because I feel like my generation has endured a lot of propaganda, programming, and messaging, along with the marketing of what getting into debt, especially getting into school debt, can mean for us. We're taught more about why we should get into debt. and why we should just sign up and enroll into a school more than really what is your path of you as a person. What is your life path, your life purpose, and who are you as a person to even take on certain things, so that you know how to handle that, that you know how to even manage that, or even if you can't pay it off, what that now does to your legacy and what that does into our generations. When we talk about the generational wealth gap, a lot goes back into it. Like we'll talk about real estate, a lot goes into the student debt and how there's certain classes, right? Because we're going to focus on that, because if we're going to focus as a culture, we got to come as one. Again, it's not just about skin tone, it's about also operating within the different classes that we have here as well. So, you know, when I think about you know, Biden's administration, and I want to be able to provide some information, facts. I don't want to just go off rhetoric. I don't want to just go off opinion. And so I bring my notes. You know, one of the notes I wrote down here: if student debt relief fails, what does that mean for your ability to start a business, buy a home, or invest in your future? If student debt relief fails, what does that mean? As you start to think about, then you may have this idea: I want to start a business, I want to start talking, I want to start a YouTube, but I can't because I got to work this job to pay off the student debt. I want to get this house, but you can't because you got to pay off student debt. What I look at, and that's why I want, you know, I want us to push for accountability from our policymakers. I want us to push that, because that right there allows us to hold ourselves accountable of what we've involved ourselves into, and it allows us to hold those accountable that are creating policies that can actually just evaporate a lot of this. You know, and when I talk about evaporating, let's really get into it, right? Let's really get into it. What I have it here on my notes, because I want to really talk about I really want to focus on you all understanding what's going on, right? As of November 2020, November 20th, which is when I'm recording this, but just take this as November in 2024, the landscape of student debt relief in the United States is undergoing significant changes due to recent political developments. I want to get into this information. Listen up close. Biden administration efforts, because a lot of people talk about, did Biden clear student debt? Did he not? You know, let's really get into it and really understand, for us to be educated, because there's a lot of people that went to school that still aren't educated. You went to school, but you still don't pay attention. You still do the same things that you were doing in school, just to go because that's what somebody told you to do. And we need to stop that. You need to figure out what your skill, what your purpose, what your path is, and then align yourself in either a trade school. You have YouTube now. Align yourself in the actual action thinking. Figure out how to work some tools. Figure out how to work your gift. Figure out how to work your voice. This is the time. Stop being lazy. Stop just listening to what people say. Put aside the fear. Because at the end of the day, somebody just telling you to go to school and they want to be mad. Let's say if you have a parent that's just telling you, that parent's telling you just to go to school, and they're upset. They're bringing this energy to you where you feel pressure. Well, think about this now. That is not your pressure to have, because it will be your life that you will have in the next 20, 30, 40, 50, and beyond, where you, because of that decision you made under pressure to do something, will now live with you, especially if you incur debt. Okay? When we look at the Biden administration, the efforts, the Biden-Harris administration, see, they actively pursued student debt relief, approving over $175 billion in cancellations for approximately 5 million borrowers. Now we know that's a very small scale of the students that are attending, but still something scraping. This is what takes place though. This includes initiatives like the SAVE plan, which is saving on valuable education, which offers lower monthly payments and faster forgiveness, right? Now, there were some legal challenges that where people were like, wait, am I forgiven? Am I not forgiven? You keep saying this. Well, for one thing, let's talk about the legal challenges, which weren't eliminating everything for everyone. For some, making it lower. For some, making it faster. It's a process. Everything isn't just Santa Claus, here's your present, here's your gift. Let's talk about some of the legal challenges. Many of these initiatives have faced legal obstacles, leading to delays and and uncertainties for borrowers waiting. you may look and say, what are some of the legal challenges that go into that, right? The legal challenges to enter student debt relief look at Supreme Court ruling. Let's go into the Supreme Court ruling. In June 2023, the Supreme Court ruled against the administration's broad student loan forgiveness plan, stating that the Secretary of Education lacked the authority to cancel such debt under the HEROES Act. I'm going to get into it, the HEROES Act. So when we talk about some of the challenges, remember, that's why when we talk, it's not just voting a president. You also got your Congress, you got your Senate, you got all these different acting parties that are putting into a vote, putting into a discussion, putting into what works as a moving body, not just one person, right? So even though Biden's administration could, push for this, it's about the Supreme Court coming together and who's on that court and what really works for the people. Another thing, you look at injunctions against the safe plays. There was some injunctions against that, which were subsequent efforts, such as, with the SAFE plan, with the repayment plan, they faced these legal challenges resulting in delays, preliminary, we'll get back to it, we'll keep pushing it off. Why is that? I mentioned something earlier about the HEROES Act when I said, and I want to go back and read this, in June 2023, again, we're talking about the legal challenges. We're focusing on the legal challenges of that have happened towards student debt relief, so that you can understand and we can understand as people what's happening and what's going on. We have people that graduate and say, why my debt isn't being cleared. In June 2023, the Supreme Court ruled against the administration's broad student loan forgiveness plan, stating the Secretary of Education lacked the authority to cancel such debt under the HEROES Act. Well, you may ask, what's the HEROES Act? Well, the HEROES Act, the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act of 2003, is, boy, it's a name. Boy, we can come up with some names, can't we? And some acronyms. Is a U.S. federal law that provides the Secretary of Education with the authority to waive or modify certain federal student loan requirements. During specific emergencies, its primary aim is to support borrowers affected by national emergencies such as wars, military operations, or natural disasters. So basically, the student education has the authority to waive or modify. So you would think that we would be able to, this would help us in our student debt. However, let's go into of the key features with the HEROES Act. Emergency authority allows the Secretary of Education to waive or modify statutory or regulatory provisions for federal student aid programs during a national emergency. Examples include suspending payments, adjusting repayment terms, or forgiving loans under specific circumstances. So if you remember going through the pandemic, COVID, there was a period where certain repayments or certain payments were able to be pushed back. Focuses on borrowers directly affected by emergencies, such as members of the military or residents of disaster-affected areas. The intent of this is to ensure that borrowers facing hardships due to national emergencies are not placed in worse financial positions because of their student loans. Well, it's kind of almost it kind of fights itself, because when you then look and say, hey, this was in 2023 ruled, when you think about Biden's administration wanting to have a forgiveness plan, and then the HEROES Act being something that kind of blocks this, is kind of interesting. It's almost one of those things of, again, I talked about COVID time. The HEROES Act was cited by the Biden administration as the legal basis for implementing broad student debt forgiveness, arguing that the pandemic qualified as a national emergency affecting borrowers, right? So, in 2023, Supreme Court ruled against the HEROES Act for widespread student loan forgiveness. The court stated that the act was intended for targeted relief to those directly impacted by emergencies, not for broad cancellation of debt. So there we are. The semantics. It's like, hey, we're going to look out for you, and that's the problem right here with our country and the culture. We're going to look out for you, but only under these guidelines, only under these methods. So when we look at some of the controversy of this act, you know, a lot of people argue that the act does not grant the Secretary of Education the power for broad loan cancellation without Congress approval, right? So when you talk about, okay, what's broad versus targeted, I hope you can follow me. Critics believe the act's intent is limited to providing temporary relief for specific groups rather than sweeping forgiveness policies. So you'll see that this act, and this is the thing, where Biden's administration is looking at a broad, looking at everybody in the pie. If you went to school, you enrolled, you got debt, boom, you in the pie. What this act is doing is a very targeted group. So again, it's a very biased look. So why it matters, the HEROES Act remains as a critical point of debate in student debt relief discussions. While it provides flexibility during emergencies, it limits its interpretation by the courts. So while it does help during emergencies, it's so limited in how the courts comprehend, and that's the problem we have in America. Our comprehension and our ability to have nuance and grace with how things are moving in policies is so black and white sometimes. And I don't know if that's just a people thing, where if it's not blue, but it can't be green, because there's no way a yellow can mix in there. You feel me? So you listen to all of this, and what does all of this means? Monitor official communications from Department of Education. We need to be on point, and we need to be very vocal when it comes to the Department of Education, because when you look at this new administration, right? Because let's talk about the new administration, because I have it here on my notes as well. But you know, I'm getting my notes together. Where we at? Because I want to talk to you about some of the things that the new administration has outlined, and understanding what that can do as well. So President-elect Donald Trump, his position on, you know, some of these things is to dismantle, right? So I'm going to get into this more though. Some things I wrote down here. If you kind of remember, his previous administration stalled on decisions of student debt cancellation. If you remember that, they stalled on that, right? So we're also talking about now where we're looking at a proposed dismantle of the Department of Education. So what does that mean? You know, President-elect Donald Trump has expressed intentions to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education, aiming to transfer its functions to state control. What does that mean? Implications of shifting functions to state control. This now deals with how states get to monitor and have autonomy of what one, the debt looks like, right, when it comes to disparities and educational quality and how that is dispersed. So now when you talk about public schooling and you talk about how everybody's on the same standard, or how certain methods are looked out when it comes to the federal aid impact on federal student aid, where you're looking at the management of federal student loans, and grants could become fragmented. But it's going to become a complicated process when it becomes just a state controlled thing. And then you even look at the civil rights enforcement. The enforcement of federal civil rights protections in education, including those related to discrimination, may weaken without a centralized federal authority. So without a centralized government, we have now Texas being able to rewrite education. We have Florida being able to rewrite history and education. And that ultimately lies into what you're doing with yourself, right? I'm tying all this back into, again, how are we moving as people? How are we being honest with ourselves as people? And how are we truly taking the power within our hands to make the right moves of breaking the noise and reclaiming the truth? The truth is that we've been set up to be in positions where we're just like this country, in debt, hungry, greedy, violent, manipulative, in our own circles, in our own rights. It's in our blood. So we need to be honest. We need to take moments where we're really breathing in, not so caught up in this capitalistic cycle. Because what this capitalistic cycle is going to show you down the line at some point, that hey, you're going to be put into a deep hole. And it's going to be the powers around you that now have this ultimate power that does not represent us as people. It does not speak our voice. So how are we speaking our voice? How are we uplifting the standards to be Americans? Because as the goal, what I'm gonna say here, as a man of color, as a melanated person, I want my people, specifically people of color, to feel empowered of being American. You know, I know they say we're African American. I think that was part of the programming for me, and the assimilation, the kind of just brainwashing, because you are American. You're here on the soil. Your people built this country. Your people fueled this country. We continue to feed. Take us out of it, it's nothing. Right? Sports, entertainment, pop culture, even now the government. It's us. So with that being said, I want you to recognize your voice. I want you to recognize your power. I want you to recognize your network is your net worth, because it goes beyond your wealth, which I know a lot of us care about this, which is important. But this right here is a tool along with this voice and this mind. So how you're using these tools will always redefine and shape up the form of the reality that fits you and fits those around us. So this is F the Culture by yours truly, Poeticlee. Make sure you tune in on YouTube. I look forward for us being able to talk. We got more to talk about with the student debt relief. We got more to talk about with climate control.